Here we go. Look at this. AAA quality materials, fully game ready, inside a software that is completely 100% free. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, for the second part of my AAA texturing course inside of InstaMAT. In the previous episode, we did see how to import our FBX file from Blender with proper orientation, proper settings, and pivot. We then went over how we create a new package, a new project, so that we can start texturing our asset. And we also checked as a last step our bake map panels, where we did discuss a little bit over all the different settings we have and all the different map settings that we need to get a AAA quality result bake with no artifacts. And now we, on part two, are going to get started with the fun part, which is texturing our asset. I'm going to show you all the different techniques. I'm super excited to show you how to use paint brushes, how to use the pre-made PBR materials, how to make a fake glass using only opacity shade, using only PBR metallic with an opacity layer, and not relying on stuff like transmission in case your game engine doesn't allow it. So the old school way of doing things, and also how to add text, fonts, text embossing on our asset. And yeah, without further ado, let's get started. Okay, first thing I want to do is to reset my workspace so it is default, just like for you guys. I'm gonna disable my material group on the top right over here, and we are back with our default matte cap. And I want to remove all the post-processing effects like exposure, saturation, lightness, and contrast. Let's also reset the HDRI map, the opacity, and yeah, this is back to our default look with just the default bake maps enabled. And now what we want to do is get back to the viewport settings and change our HDRI to a studio matte cap. And the reason for this is right now we have an abandoned train station. And let me just increase the opacity and remove the blur. And you can see we have lots of different colors. So we have some green, some red, brick red, some yellow from the concrete. And we don't want that because all these little extra colors will reflect on our shading, and that's why we want a neutral environment so our textures will look great no matter if we place them in a grass field or the desert or anything. And for that I like the Studio 5 lights because it has no very dark spots like in here, but instead a consistent lighting with pretty solid highlights. So let's crank back the opacity to 0, and everything else we can leave at default. The only setting we want to play with before we move on to texturing is the exposure value. As you can see, by default it is a value of 2, and it works very great with the default railroad matte cap. But you can see that if I switch back to our Studio.5, it is completely overexposed. And of course, the black matte cap might be the best way to preview it. So you want to add a multi-channel layer with this drop-down button, which is simply the substance equivalent of a fill layer. And here it just starts with a nice little middle blue color. And you can see that this is just way too bright. Like the highlights are being way too strong. And we want to play with the exposure until we have something that has nice looking highlights and nice smooth shadows. And for my case, I found out that a value like 1.25 worked great. It gives, I could have toned it a little bit more down, but I like when there is like that extra punchy color. And yeah, just play with it, turn the HDRI around until it looks nice. Next, we can move to the texturing side panel we have on the right. So for the top part, this is our layer stack. We have our active material. Mine is named TD Checker because of the textile density add-on inside Blender, and I forgot to rename it. but that's okay. We have only one texture set. Here we can choose which channel opacity blending we want to adjust, just like in Substance, for base color, height, roughness, pretty much all our channels on the left over here. And here we have our layer stack that is literally begging us to fill it up. So far, I only have my finalized material group that I disabled and or previously made multi-channel layer. For the reminder, again, is the same as a fill layer inside of Substance Painter. We have our blending mode, opacity, strength, and our blending mode panel. As you can see, all the essentials one are here. We have add, subtract, multiply, screen overlay, and many more. If I click on it, I have two different panels in here. I have the layer projection panel, which lets us choose the projection type between UV, triplanar, and decal. We can tweak the scale, rotation, offset, add some softness to it, and that's pretty much all it is for. And then we have layer channels where we can select which channels we want to keep enabled or disabled. So far we only have base color, but we have height, roughness, metallic, AO, and everything we need. Let me just walk you through real quick on what these 5 fill type buttons do. Graph resource will let us use a procedural noise as an input, and it's very useful for creating high details. Let's, for example, grab cloud spots over here, and we might not be able to see very well with the camera, but you can see we're starting to have a little grain over here, and we can tweak it. We can increase the scale, increase the frequency, the density, gamma, and everything just to get nice little grungy details. Fill color, just like the name implies, fills everything inside your channel with a single color. You can tweak different values in here, and you also have an eyedropper to select a color inside of your screen. Image resource will let you pick any imported or existing image as an input. You'll quite often, or in fact all the time, use it with mask by selecting grunges or as decals. Reference layer, we use an existing layer or mask as an input. This is the exact same thing as anchor points inside of Substance Painter. For now we don't have any, but we'll see on that later. The disable button will turn off a layer completely and use information from previous layers instead. Here, for example, I have a top layer with a roughness set to 100% and the bottom one with a roughness of 0%. If I disable this layer completely, you can see that my material is completely shiny. That sums it up for the fill layer types, and now we want to move on to the modifier and creation toolbar over here, which is also duplicated on the top shelf over there. This crop tool looking icon will add a mask to our selected layer. Here we have our favorites, the ones we used recently, and as you can see, there is no lack of choice. We'll get over all the important ones later down this tutorial. The add reference button will create a reference of your currently selected layer for later reusability in the layer stack. This is exactly the same thing as anchor points inside of Substance Painter. Generators are meant to add micro-variation details inside an existing material. This is not the same as Substance Painter generators, and it uses grayscale grunge map as an input that you can tweak with blending mode to get different varying results. Let me, for example, take this gold material I have in here, add a generator to it. Let's say I want to add dirt 3. For now, it is completely black and it affects 100% of our material. We can play with the grunge scale over here, balance and contrast. And what we need to do now is play with the blending mode. As you can see, if I tweak it to something like around 10%, I can give a more grungy and dirty look to my gold material without any additional help from multiple mask and layer and keeping this layer stack tidy and clean. Filters will let us apply adjustment to our selected layer or masks. As you can see, the entire library from Substance Painter is also available inside of InstaMAT, and they are working just the same. For example, let me add levels to my gold material. I can adjust the base color. I can also adjust the roughness. And one little precision I want to add to this is that adding a filter to a layer is not the same as adding a layer to a mask. It took me quite some time to figure this out, but as you can see, the icon is different. This one was a layer, this one will adjust the mask. Adding an effect will completely modify a layer based on what the effect does. Here I'm adding a warp, And you can see it adds that little warping deformation on the entire layer. Keep in mind that you cannot add an effect to a mask. That's it for the modifiers. Let's go with the creation buttons on the right. We can add our selected layer to a group by clicking this button or hitting Ctrl G, and we can rename our group, add a mask, a filter, and adjust the opacity and blending mode for the entire layers inside that group. This button on the far right with the little layer from a layer stack, we can also press backspace, and this button just in between will let us add a new layer. There are only 4 layer types we can use inside of InstaMAT for texturing our asset. The fifth one is a layer group that we've seen already, and the last one is an empty layer. The empty layer, if you come from a programming background, is the same as adding a comment. And this is a very useful feature if you need to pass on your work to another colleague. You can, for example, type layers below this should not be touched. And this way you can indicate your colleague in the layer stack what he should be playing with, what he should not touch at all. For the texturing layer, the first one we have is the multi-channel layer. I already showed you. It's the same as Substance Painter's fill layer. All you do with it is you input different PBR values, add some mask, play with the blending mode, the opacity, and try to come up with something realistic. That's all there is to it. The next layer type we have for texturing is called the element layer, and what is so great about this is that it lets us use an entire PBR material, customizable PBR material as an input in a layer stack. Let me, for example, grab the gold one I've used previously. And you can see we can adjust everything. We can change the details. We can change the saturation. We can add some oxidation. They are very, very customizable. And I forgot to also say that the library inside of InstaMAT is gigantic. We have all the PBR materials you can think of. We have brick walls. We have sands. We have leather, fabrics, dirt. We have grass. We have everything you need pretty much inside of PBR materials, you can have it inside of InstaMAT. And again, I repeat it, everything is for free. Also, ladies and gentlemen, if you believe this tutorial series brought you anything in terms of knowledge, I would really appreciate if you could hit like and subscribe. I know it's pricey, it's 2 mouse clicks, but it would really motivate me to make much more InstaMAT and other 3D content tutorial here on YouTube. So thanks a lot if you do this, and let's continue. Next, we have the multi-channel brush layer, which is pretty much the same as a multi-channel layer, except that instead of filling our entire 3D object with PBR values, we can just paint it. And by default, it comes with a standard round brush. We only have the base color enabled. I can do a stroke in here. You can see it's a blue color. We can then change the color, for example, to green. And I believe it's something that's really going to be useful for any one of you that does lots of hand painting, stylized character. And yeah, here we can adjust some of the default brush settings like the opacity, the sharpness, add a little bit of vignette effect. And that's like for the layer channels. And next, we can also tweak our brush properties, so we can change the radius. There is also a shortcut. You can hold Control left click, it will increase it. Control right click and moving the mouse up and down will change the flow. We can change the spacing, we can increase the follow, rotation. There's also symmetry, which is very handy. We can choose to align it, and then we also have brush dynamics. In case you have a stylus, you can, for example, randomize it, and that way we have slight randomization, and you can base it on, for example, pressure, the tilt of your stylus, the rotation, and so on. So yeah, having a drawing tablet is very useful for this case. And the last thing I want to show you is that sometimes we can all agree that a round brush is a little bit boring. So we can go over here on the left on our shelf, go all the way down to paintbrushes. And now we are being presented with different brush presets. So for example, let me grab the airbrush pressure. Let's change our material to not yellow, but yeah, let's go with this purple. And we can just sort of do a you can see we have some little aerograph effect. Maybe scatter course is going to be more noticeable. Yeah, here you can see. And the best thing also about InstaMAT is that you can even make your own custom brushes, but that's for a different episode. It's in a different section of InstaMAT, like I think it's called with atoms, node graphs. But just so you know, yeah, you can completely make your own custom brushes with completely different settings. You can change the scale over here of our shape scatter. So, yeah, so this software is insanely powerful. Like you can do a lot, you can play a lot with it and do a lot of things. And that summarizes it for the multi-channel brush. And for our final texturing layer tab, we have the element brush, which you probably guessed it is the same as an element layer, except this time we can paint complete PBR materials inside of our texture set. So here, let me grab some classic dirt. I'm gonna pick the clay wall too. And here we have our brush settings and our clay wall material settings. In here we can adjust. Let me grab a scatter coarse round brush, increase a little bit with control right click the opacity, and we can start painting our PBR dirt material directly onto our mesh without having to use any sort of masking, which you would do for an element layers with a mask. Here you just go grab and paint. And it's also very nice because we can switch our element layer type to something else, and it will, for example, I don't like the clay wall. Let's go with I don't know, sailing. We can switch to, so here it finished loading, and we can start populating our 3D model with a sailing. So right now it just looks like something absolutely white, but you get the idea. And that's it for the second part of my AAA texturing course inside of InstaMat. I know you guys are already eager to get started with texturing, but I really wanted to show you the basics of the InstaMat layering system, just so you don't follow me blindly and you actually understand what each layer do, how does it work, etc. And yeah, see you in the next chapter.